What up, everybody? Welcome to Music Blueprint, where we teach you how to make money as a musician. If you haven't seen some of our other podcasts and videos, I would definitely go watch them because we teach you all about the industry, how to make money, which is very important when you're making art. Sometimes, you just make art for art, but a lot of people in this industry don't know how to make money. And today, we are going to talk about how you don't lose money. And the reason why we're going to talk about this is because a lot of people in the industry are getting screwed over in contracts. They don't understand the lingo, they don't understand the verbiage. And so I thought I would just go over a few lawyer-ish terms so that you know what it means, and so that the next time you see it in a contract, you're not confused or trying to search all of Google just to find the answer. You find the answer right here. And I'm not going to do a lot of terms. There's just so many that it would just take me an hour to go over. And I like to keep these podcasts short and sweet. So I might do a part 2. But for now, this is the first one that I'm doing. And there's only 4 key terms that I thought, man, I just use this all the time. Like literally almost every day or once a week or once a month. So let's get right into it. The first word is recoup. Now, recoup is a word that's used a lot in label contracts and contracts that you sign. Actually, no, that's still considered label contracts. And what it means is that whatever money is given to you, the label will need to get that money back before paying you out. So for instance, very recently, actually, I do this a lot, but a very recent contract I have with Suave. Suave is a EDM label that releases a ton of music. They have a great playlisting, right? And so this DJ and I signed our track over to Suave. Now with Suave, they know they have the built-in marketing. So you're technically, or they're taking money for marketing. So you're paying them to market your track, right? So in their contract, it says that they have to recoup $2,500 before we are paid out anything, okay? So that means that when the track is released, streaming on all platforms, Apple Music, Spotify, doesn't matter what it is, when that song is streaming and creating money, they have to first take the first $2,500. So you will not see a dime until $2,500 is paid to Suave. And I'm talking about my contract, okay? Then after that, usually it's some percentage deal. So in our case, the song was a cover. So we only got, I think, 35 or 40% of the master, and Suave took the rest, which is pretty steep, to be honest. Usually it's a 50-50 split, but the artist that I was working with really wanted to go with Suave, and I kind of was like, doesn't really matter to me, that percentage. So I just was like, yeah, sure, we can give it up. It's no big deal. But typically, if this was a track for myself, I would fight a little bit stronger to get that 50-50 split. Because again, if a song gets 2 million streams, let's just say it gets 2 million, right? Well, half of that will go to publishing because it's a cover, right? And we didn't write the song, so it's a cover. So half of it goes to the publishing. So you get about $4,000 to $5,000 per million streams. So we're talking about $10,000, right? Half of that's gone because we didn't write the song. There's $5,000 left. Then if it was a 50-50 split, $2,500 would go to Suave, $2,500 would go to us, right? Well, in this case, we're only getting 40%. So that's even less. So that would be about, oh God, you're like really putting me on the spot to do math. I think it's like 2,000 us and like 3,000 them, right? It's about that, right? And so that's the difference of $500. Well, $500 in a month, that could change big time. Or if you look at it on a large scale, what if your song gets 100 million streams, 10 million, 20 million, whatever. That's the difference of thousands, possibly millions of dollars. So you really need to pay attention to all of that lingo and make sure that, one, whatever they're recouping doesn't affect your 50-50 split scenario. Sometimes it's not that big of a deal, but just know, like, you're gonna have to pay whatever money they give you up front. So if you're a songwriter, you're gonna have to give, if they give you $50,000 until you recoup your deal and use your next option, you will not see a penny until that $50,000 is recouped, which means if it takes you 2 years to recoup it, it takes you 2 years, and now you're gonna have to live like $50,000 in 2 years rather than in 1 year. Does that make sense? So it doesn't matter what your period of time is, however long it takes you to recoup. If it takes you 5 years, unfortunately, you still have to recoup that $50,000 back to the label until you see another dime. So you have to keep that in mind, because if your streaming is not doing very well and your songwriting is not paying out a lot of money, sometimes it doesn't make sense for you to have a deal with such a high recoup. Yeah, you're getting paid more money up front, and if you're really desperate for money, yes, absolutely, do what you need to do. It's your decision at the end of the day. You're an adult. But sometimes that shoots people in the foot, because then they never recoup their deal, and then they never go anywhere, and they're just stuck with that. And then they're stuck with that label, because a lot of labels won't let you out of that contract until that's recouped. So making sure. Okay, so next word, a 360 deal. So many people fall into the trap of a 360 deal. And basically what a 360 deal is that the label, whoever has signed you, is taking a little piece of everything that you sell. So American Idol is a perfect example of this, and The Voice and all these TV shows. They sign you into a 360 deal. So what happens is they're saying in their contract, look, we want you to be on our show, but let's be honest, our show creates a lot of exposure, and all of the things financially that would be coming your way because of the exposure is because of us. So we will be taking a piece of those things. For instance, let's say after you do The Voice, Pepsi hires you for a commercial, and they want to pay you out $100,000 to be a part of this commercial, or they want to buy your song for $100,000. In American Idol's contract, I think it was, they would take 60% of that. So any sync deals, they say in the contract, they would take 60%. So that means out of your $100,000, you would really only be making $40,000, because American Idol, because of the clause in their contract, would be taking $60,000 of that. And they take, in a 360 deal, a piece of everything. It's merch, streaming, I mean, the list goes on and on. CD sales, any TV sync opportunities. I mean, anything that you financially create any money from musically, they are taking a piece of, okay? So a prime example of this, and this was like really bad back in the day, like everybody was signing 360 deals because people are like, I want to be famous, and then they sell their soul to the devil, and then they have no creative control and all these different things. One of a very, very prime example of this in the industry was Kesha. Kesha was coming up in the ranks, and she signed a 360 deal with, Dr. Luke, and I think they're at Sony. I don't know, you might have to fact check me on that, but signs a 360 deal. She does these albums. The albums do really well. She decides as an artist that she wants to go more alternative. Well, her label's like, absolutely not. The pop thing is working. We're not doing that. She's like, well, I want to do that. And they really wouldn't allow her to do it. So then there was this long period of time where she didn't release any music. And then, of course, there's the scandal between her and Dr. Luke, which I don't know if it's true or if it's not true, but whatever the case is, that somehow got her out of her contract. So then they ended up, I think, letting her go or not having her associated to Dr. Luke or something like that. But nonetheless, she signed a deal that she didn't like. One, she wasn't making as much money as one of the top artists in the world at the time. I mean, she was literally, it was like her, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga. I mean, it was like she was probably the top female artist, but for sure the top 10 artists globally at the time. And she wasn't making anywhere near as much money as some of these other artists because she signed a 360 deal. They take a little piece of everything, which in the grand scheme, you're like, cool, you have fame and that leads to other things as well, like more success, financially more money. But again, how much of yourself are you willing to sell before you're like, the money's not worth it. All of those things aren't worth it anymore. So you have to be really, really careful about signing 360 deals. There are benefits to it. One of the benefits is you don't have to really pay anything up front. So if you're a person that's like, I got no money and it costs thousands of dollars to make an album and thousands of dollars to market and all these different things, well, then a 360 deal maybe makes sense for you. For me, as an independent artist, it hasn't made sense. Yes, I've bitten the bullet in the short term of the fact that I didn't sign a 360 deal and it took me longer to really make money, like big money. But in the long term, because I wasn't signed to it, I actually end up making more money because I don't have people have their grubby little hands in all of my stuff. So you just have to try to think in the music industry, think long term, because a lot of people do get burnt out by having a 360 deal. And there are the benefits of everything, you know, they're paying for everything up front and they'll put you on the map and all of that stuff. But that same deal is hold true after you make it and after you start seeing success. That is still going to hold true. Most likely they're not going to renegotiate. They're not going to do any of that because they're like, well, we invested all this money in you and now we're finally seeing a return of investment and now you're trying to change our deal? Absolutely not. That wouldn't be a smart business decision for them. So you got to think of all of that. Make sure you know what's going on. Third thing are samples. A lot of people don't understand what samples are. So I'm gonna give like a very like actual descriptive thing of samples. There are pre-recorded sound recordings which are being used in another song, or i.e. a sample of an old song or sound is being used in a new one. Okay, so with samples, you have to get them approved. You can't just take a song, flip it on its head, use the beat, the sound, the melody, whatever, and you pitch it and you do all this funky stuff to it. And you're like, well, it's a different song now. It's not. You have to get those things approved. All the times that you hear Kanye using these songs, he had to get them approved. Now, the one thing about samples is that federal law protects anything 1978, from 1978 on. So anything before that is not really protected by federal law. So for instance, you could sample a Beethoven song and you don't have to credit anybody. Well, I think you still have to credit them. Possibly you have to credit them, but you definitely don't have to get anything approved. You don't have to do nothing like that. So a lot of people will sample stuff further than 1978 so they don't have to do all of that. But the other caveat is that federal law also protects whoever wrote the song and 70 years after they die. So for instance, if you pick something from the 50s or the 60s and that person is still alive, it's still protected under them. And it's protected under them for 70 plus years. So that means even after they die, the next beneficiary, which sometimes is their family or daughter or, you know, wife or husband or whatever, still is getting the money. So you have to put that into perspective as well. Like some things from the early 1900s, like 1920, 1950s, whatever, that stuff is still protected because even though somebody like Frank Sinatra died, he's dead, but 70 years after his death, his family's still going to get the money. So you got to be really careful with samples. With things like, what's that thing called? Splice. Yeah, with things like Splice, you're actually good because Splice does all the back end work for you. So when people put their samples up on Splice, they have to sign a contract saying that Splice will pay them out for their samples, if that makes sense. So then that loses their rights to the samples that they created, if that makes sense to you guys. So basically you can use a sample on Splice as long as you have a subscription or whatever, like as long as you're a paid person on Splice, you can use whatever sample you want on there and you don't have to have any approval or anything like that. I would check to make sure that that's the case with Splice, but I'm pretty sure that's the situation because I've done Splice packs before and you have to sign a whole thing. They pay you up front for it and it's just like a work for hire kind of situation. Which leads me to the final one, work for hire, okay? Work for hire is being paid up front and giving up your rights. So basically, a party A employs a party B to create, and party A becomes the legal author of the work, and party B will no longer have any ownership or rights to the recording. So for instance, there are a lot of things and websites that you can go on and create an account where you're a songwriter and somebody will hire you to sing on their track, okay? Sometimes they'll do it for work for hire, which means I'm going to pay you X amount of money to sing my song, and when you sing that song, it is now my song. You don't have any ownership to it, which means you don't get a percentage of pub, you don't get a percentage of the master. Now, if you didn't write the song, you probably wouldn't have a percentage of the master anyways. But if you did sing on it, that is your sound recording. So technically, you deserve a part of the master. But with a work for hire situation, it's basically just, I'm paying you for it, you get nothing of the song. So I've done this with a bunch of people. I've done this in a anonymous way where somebody just randomly hires me, like a DJ or something, and then I use an alias. I've also done this for people like Diane Warren, who's she writes a lot of songs, but she's not really a singer, so she has people come in and demo the vocals out so she can send it to other artists. There's a lot of different situations for that, and it hits the spectrum on, it's not just for vocals, it could be for songwriting, it could be for producing, the list goes on and on. There's a lot of ghost producers that produce for a lot of these bigger DJs, and they get paid up front and they get nothing on the back end. And so again, if you're a person that's man, I did all this work and the song is totally different because of the flavor that I put on it, you might not want to do work for hire, but you got to say that up front, because if somebody's assuming that they're paying you for a work for hire and then after you lay it down and it sounds amazing, you're like, hey man, I don't really want to do work for hire. Usually that doesn't work for people. So it's easier to do the legal stuff before the emotional stuff comes in. Now, sometimes if you're like, hey, I just want to, I know this is a Hail Mary and I know I agreed to work for hire, but I really think I made this song so much better. Would you be open to the idea? And then they could say yes or no. Or you could say, look, I'll refund you your money back and take the vocals, whatever, not give you the vocals because I just think that I deserve a part of the percentage, and then you can negotiate it from there. But you just have to be very, you're walking on eggshells when you do it that way. So just be very aware and very emotionally intelligent, because if you've already agreed to something in the beginning, it's really difficult to renege it afterwards. It just doesn't typically work that way. Now you can, but I'm just saying it's really hard, especially when expectations are set and then you're trying to change expectations. So anyways, those are some, here we go. Those are some legal terms that people use very frequently that you should know what they are. Again, if you have any questions about those terms, please ask me the questions below. I would love to answer them. I'm very active on my social profiles, so please hit me up, hit me in the comments, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe or share it. I would be so, so grateful, and I will see you next week. Peace.